Hello and welcome. I'm Imran Garda, sitting in for Riz Khan. As the standoff in Egypt continues, will the spirit of revolution translate into something more concrete, or will the people be forced to return to the status quo? While protesters insist on Mubarak stepping down, Western governments have been conspicuously hesitant in their response, fearful as ever that any movement away from autocratic secular regimes means an inevitable slide into radical theocratic governments hostile to the West and antagonistic towards Israel. But as Egypt tries to redefine its future, are there other political possibilities that move beyond these age-old stereotypes? Well, today we ask, can Egypt's revolt lead to new political alternatives? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and your comments. Well, joining us now from Vancouver, Canada, is world-renowned Muslim scholar Tariq Ramadan, and from the Slovenian capital, Ljubljana, we are joined by world-famous radical philosopher Slavoj Zizek. Thanks a lot for joining us, both of you, gentlemen. Tariq Ramadan, if I could start with you, do you think a revolution is taking place?
Yes, I think that after what happened in Tunisia, what is happening now in Egypt is just, it was unbelievable, and it's still unpredictable, but it's a revolution, and I think that we have to listen to the people saying, enough with dictatorship, enough with Mubarak and his regime, and what we want now is more freedom, democracy, dignity, and this is what should be understood. Now, anything which is built on that, saying, oh, it's either the dictatorship or radical Islamist and a theocracy, and what is said about this is much more ideologically oriented than the reality of what is happening now, of a revolution coming from people on the ground saying, we want a change in our country and we want freedom.
Slavoj Zizek, you wrote about former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's now the quartet's envoy, having a sort of fear of this process that was unfolding in the interviews that he's given. And he spoke about the fact that the West, as he defined it, needs to sort of manage the situation and the transition. He seemed to have a real serious fear as to what was happening. What do you make of that? Was he implying that the Egyptians or the Arabs are not worthy of democracy?
Well, of course, he wouldn't say this openly, publicly. But I think his message, if one can read between the lines, was quite unambiguous. You know that wonderful French proverb, plus que ça change, plus ça reste le même. The more it changes, the more it stays the same. So it's obviously that what Western powers, insofar as they were represented by Tony Blair, what they want was some changes which would basically enable the global situation to remain the same. Against this, I would like to emphasize, totally agreeing with what Tariq just said, one point. You know how often in our multicultural era, where we all are suspicious about universalism, we like to hear how democracy, as we understand it, is something specifically Western. You should understand different cultures, and so on and so on. But what affected me tremendously when I was not only looking at the general picture of Cairo, but listening to interviews with participants, protesters there, is how cheap, irrelevant all this multicultural talk becomes. There, where we are fighting a tyrant, we are all universalists. We are immediately solidary with each other. That's how you build universal solidarity, not with some stupid UNESCO multicultural respect. We respect your culture, you ours. It's the struggle for freedom. Here we have a direct proof, A, that freedom is universal, and B, especially a proof against that cynical idea somehow Muslim crowds prefer some kind of religiously fundamentalist dictatorship, whatever. No! What happened in Tunisia, what happens now in Egypt, it's precisely this universal revolution for dignity, human rights, economic justice. This is universalism at work. What we see daily in Egypt. One Egyptian protester said, I'm proud that I'm Egyptian. I am proud for them. They gave us the lesson against this falsely respectful but basically racist prejudices. You know, oh, Arabs have their specific culture, they cannot really get it. They got it. They understand democracy by doing what they are doing better than we do in the West, in Western Europe, with our anti-immigrant parties and so on and so on. So I'm proud for them. I mean, again, here is universalism. This is the best argument that you can see on TV against all that trash about clash of civilizations and so on and so on. The moment you fight tyranny, we are solidary. No clash of civilizations. We all know what we mean. No miscommunication here.
Tariq Ramadan, what do you think of that? I mean, looking at the possible alternatives on offer, can Islamism or any relationship to political Islam and secular liberal democracy work together in any future of Egypt or any other country in the region?
Look, what Zizek is just saying now, it's so important that when we speak from where we are, you know, in the West or in the Western countries, we look at the situation in the Arab world, and for years the regimes there were supported by the West, saying if it's not them, it's going to be worse than them, with radical Islamists, and this is the way it was built. So the dictators were saying this, and the West were supporting these views, and then supporting the Tunisian people after they started their mass protest and their revolution. So we are supporting democratic values and principles and models when it suits us. Not in the West, I mean, not abiding by our own values. So I think that this is exactly it. If we are serious about the universality of our democratic values and freedom and equality, we have to be clear that this is the time to support the people in Egypt, not to be silent, to say, okay, wait and see, and we'll see what the army, and why? Because we are protecting security and we are protecting the state of Israel. And Israel government saying we are supporting Mubarak because if it's not Mubarak, it's going to be, you know, Islamist. What is this? What is this logic saying that the security of Israel is going to be a reality with dictatorships around Israel?
It's interesting that you say that. I mean, I want to ask you about this. This fear of radical Islam, which we seem to hear throughout the airwaves, particularly here in the United States, in Europe, etc. Do you think that if that was a real and tangible fear, that a country like perhaps Saudi Arabia might have been mentioned a long, long time ago, where women don't have many rights, yes. They can't drive, women, for example, people can be sentenced to death for things like witchcraft and sorcery in a place like Saudi Arabia, yet they've signed a $60 billion arms deal with the United States. Do you think that if this fear of a radical interpretation of Islam was sincere, that a place like Saudi Arabia would be at the center of the debate and not Egypt or any other place?
Exactly. I think that if we are serious about that, how come we are speaking about human rights and women's rights, and we are supporting from the states the Saudi Arabian regime without saying anything about what is happening within the country? I think that this is pure hypocrisy. Now, what is going on in Egypt, it's a mass, you know, these are mass demonstrations. It's not led by the Muslim Brotherhood, as it is said, and this, you know, spreading around fear about radical Islamism. It's completely an ideological projection to protect, you know, their geostrategic interests, and it's following you know, this propaganda coming from Israel saying we have to support Mubarak. Now, what is going on with the Muslim Brotherhood? First, they are not the leading force there. The second is within the Muslim Brotherhood, you have trends, you have people who are very close to the Saudi in what comes to the literalist understanding of Islam, but you have also people very close to the Turkish, you know, interpretation of what it means to be faithful to Islam, with the AKP party and the running party now in Turkey. And these people, for the last 60 years, they were not radicals. They were law-abiding, non-violent, anti-colonialists, and they want freedom. The point is not this. We are talking now about women. We are talking about democratic processes. It's not the true reason. The true reason is that if you follow democracy in Egypt, if you follow the trends, even the Islamists, the true question is about about equal rights, autonomy, having access to their economic wealth, and not being under the pressure of the United States of America, and also asking